I did this climb last summer as part of a family road trip up through Canada and the Pacific Northwest. And I was telling Juliana that I specifically took lots of pictures so that I could share them with you. So I have been fascinated with the Bugaboos for decades, ever since I first saw them, probably in the late 90s in I think some kind of mountaineering calendar. I saw them and said, I have to go there. And I did a lot of stuff in my 20s, late 90s, early 2000s. But I never made it here. And I ended up getting married, having kids, and doing a whole bunch of things that were not mountaineering. So I started to wonder if I was ever going to make it there. But it never kind of left my mind that this is someplace I'd want to go. And you can see why, because there are these gorgeous granite spires covered in this black lichen that gives it the neat black, really dark gray appearance. And you get to cross glaciers just to get to the base of the climbs. So, hi guys. We decided last summer or a year ago, to go on a 1-month road trip up through the Pacific Northwest. And it's a long ways. I mean, we are down here in New Mexico. We had to drive all the way up here. So it took us about a week to get there with a stop at a friend's house in Wyoming. But it was a serious trek with 3 boys and a dog. But it's way up there. I went there once to Jasper and Banff 20 years ago to do Athabasca and some stuff, but I didn't drive. Actually, we did drive. I was much younger, so we were able to do it in 2 days. But so zooming in the Bugaboos are actually in this mountain range here, which is, I don't know, maybe 100, 200 miles west of Calgary. And I always thought that it was part of the Canadian Rockies. And turns out it's not. It's actually part of the coastal range, which seems weird because they're way over here and the Rockies are right here. But it turns out that this little green line right here actually separates 2 different geological ranges. And these are the Canadian Rockies crumbly, chossy rocks that you're used to. And these are beautiful granite rocks that are more associated with the coastal range. When you see, like in the Pacific Northwest mountains up near Mount Shuckshin and Baker and stuff like that up in Washington. So that was a surprise. I didn't know that when I first got there, but the guide that I hired told me that. So zooming in, this is that kind of flat valley in between the Rockies and the Purcell Range, which is where the Bugaboos are. And you have to take from that valley a dirt road, Forest Service road. It's about 30 miles. So it takes about an hour to drive up there. If you have a big sequoia like we had, and you can go as fast as you want without rattling to pieces. And so we got there pretty quickly. And then you start your climb or hiking in. So here's another zoom in. This is with Google Earth. We park basically right here, and you take this trail that kind of goes along the south-facing slope of this mountain here, and so that it was clean. There was quite a bit more snow than you see here in this picture. The snow went down way into here. They got a ton of snow last year, And I read in the chip or in the log in the hut that the first people showing up there in June showed up and they said, "Holy snow!" That was what they had written in there because they'd never seen that much snow before. So that was kind of cool to get to go there in a year that they received so much. But this is the basic area. There's a number of different spires and glaciers that we got to go on, and it was a lot of fun. So getting there, we left here, as I said, around July 1st. So we're pretty close to the longest days of the year. And we started our trip going to bed based upon when the sun went down. And that was fine through about Wyoming, but we noticed that by the time we got into Montana and then especially Canada, that we were going to bed at almost 11 o'clock at night. And we were sleeping well into the day. So we had to change that up, but it's a long ways. It was 1,500 miles. It was a long ways to go with that many people in the car, but luckily we have electronic devices to keep them occupied. And the dog is just a good dog. But when we got there, we found out that they hadn't really gotten summer yet. It hadn't started. And we got there on July 7th, and it looked pretty much like this. It was rainy, and we looked at the forecast, and it was just forecast to be like this for the foreseeable future. And so I started getting a little nervous because my climb started on the 11th. We were there on the 7th. And I was like, if things don't change, I don't think this is going to happen. And it's amazing in Banff area that where we were, from where you're taking the pictures to the tops of these peaks, that's a vertical mile. But the peaks go right up into the clouds, and the weather was very unstable. You never knew what it was going to do. So you always had to have rain jackets with you because it could start raining at any moment. And so, this is just a couple days before the climb. And we'd already been there a couple days, and I was getting a little nervous. But everything cleared up the day of the climb, and here we are at the first point. You come around the corner and you finally get your first view of the Bugaboos, and this is the houndstooth. It's a very prominent outcropping that you see when you're doing the approach. But most of the Bugaboo spires are all over here on the right, and that's where we end up hiking in. And we didn't have any choice but to stop and take pictures ourselves because everybody in front of us was doing the same thing. And so we got to the trailhead, and here my family is dropping me and the guide off. And you don't know what I'm thinking in my head right now, but it's basically, I hope this isn't a total disaster, because there is a backstory to it. The backstory is I herniated my disc L5-S1 in 2011, and it wasn't getting any better, and I had to have surgery, microdiscectomy, to remove the stuff that was just being jammed into my nerve. And during the recovery period, which lasted probably 2 years, it was not smooth at all. I got down to probably 135 pounds, and I was completely unstable. I couldn't do anything without worrying about having a spasm or something again. So I was pretty much convinced the Bugaboos were out of the picture for me. And I'd likely never carry a heavy pack again. And so I stopped climbing. So when I moved here, I was hoping that maybe if I just hiked enough and climbed enough and just made it part of my regular everyday life, that my problems would go away. That was not the case. No matter how much I hiked, climbed, practiced, I I would always be unstable and I couldn't get any better. So I finally just stopped climbing and hiking altogether. And I just went into the gym here at the YMCA and started focusing on strength training. And I got back up to 150 pounds. I gained all of the muscle that I had lost back. And it turns out that was the key to getting my strength back and being able to do things again. So, and I only did a minimal amount of training. As you remember, last spring, they closed the forest. I got one hike up the ski hill road. And I was thinking, okay, well, this is how I'll train. I'll do the ski hill road. Well, then they closed the whole area, and I couldn't even use the road. So the only choice I had, the only thing that got enough elevation gain that would mimic the climb was the Blue Dot Trail. So I would hike down the Blue Dot Trail, go down, and I would go further and further down, and I would go down with an empty pack and tennis shoes on, and then I fill up my backpack with rocks and put on my mountaineering boots, and then I'd hike back up. And I don't know if you've noticed this pile of rocks that's there right now. It's still there. But those are mine. There's this little pile of river rocks at the very top. They're very out of place. And then I was able finally to get one trip up Cerro Grande with a full pack like that as well, just before. But I did not do a lot of training for this. I said I need to be able to do this just with my strength training in the gym and a little conditioning and just save it for the climb, because most likely I just hurt myself with the training. I want to make sure I did the climb. So that's what I'm thinking right here. I hope this isn't a big disaster. I hope that my back holds up and they don't have to helicopter me out of there. So dropped me off, and it's about 3,000 feet over 3 miles, which is basically the Blue Dot Trail ascent rate, and 40-pound pack. So that's what I was holding on to, and I had trained myself to really keep that abdominal pressure tight while I was doing the hike. And so there's that view of the Houndstooth. It's very lush, green, hot, humid, and buggy. The guide that I was with, his name is Sean. He said he's never seen it this buggy, and probably because they had so much snowfall that year. So it's very, very lush. The beginning is actually pretty flat, so you gain all that elevation gain actually in the last 2 miles. So it was pretty steep. So here we are, kind of coming out of the trees and the lush area. We're getting some wind, and so finally the mosquitoes are dying away a little bit. And we're starting to get some views of the Snowpatch Spire coming around the corner. Here's the Bugaboo Glacier. And we're finally coming out of the trees and looking back at where we came from. And then the trail was all washed out with snow. Usually you can hike up all the way up to the hut and not never hit any snow, but with the heavy snowfall, it was all still there. And the hillside starts getting pretty steep. And it was gorgeous to see the moraine down at the bottom, and you can just hear the water roaring. It just echoes from all directions. It was fantastic. So that's kind of looking to the south at some of the other peaks on the other side in the glacier. And the trail is actually really good. I was impressed with how well maintained it was. This is looking down at the moraine. You can see this edge actually goes way, way, way down. And there are some sections that are really steep that they actually put a chain up, which was nice, because it gets pretty narrow in some sections. And then, so that's Sean, the guide, and they built these really nice little just stairs right into the hillside. And if those weren't there, it would be very difficult to get through there with the heavy pack on. And then they have, I don't know if you've seen any videos or pictures of this route, but there's this cool little ladder that they built because it wouldn't be very easy to get up that section either. And then with the last 500 feet up to the hut, the snow really kind of settled in, and that you could hear the water running underneath you. And I asked him, "Are we going to punch through?" And he's like, "No." He said it very confidently. I said, "Okay." So we didn't, but I was always nervous that we were going to. That's looking back down towards the beginning of the snow section that goes all the way up to the hut. And now here we are actually at the hut, and this is the view right from the front of the hut. So this is actually called the Conrad Kain Hut. And I have a section at the end of the talk where I go over what's actually in the hut, but I saved it as a extra section in case we run out of time. But here is the houndstooth. This right here is called the snow patch spire, and that snow patch right there is why they call it that. Then looking further over to the right, that is the Bugaboo Spire. That's what I originally wanted to climb. It's one of the North America's classic 50 climbs. It's a 5.7 up the north side of that ridge on it that I wanted to climb. And then up here, so this is the hut, and then further up here, this is where the tent campers are able to camp. It's the Apple Dome or something like that. So that's, and you have to head up in that direction if you want to climb the Bugaboo Spire or some of the other peaks that are in the back. So that night, we just kind of took it easy. We slept in until 5 in the morning, which most of the people actually woke up at 2. And I usually don't sleep very well at altitude, but since moving here, it's not a problem because this is actually slightly lower than where we are right now. So apparently these people were up at 2, 3 in the morning making a big ruckus, and I slept through the whole thing. It was fantastic. He said I was like his only client that's ever done that. So that was kind of neat. So we woke up at 5, and we were going to go over here and do what's called a donkey's ears. And we did this route called 2 ears. They call it a Bugaboo 5.7, so it's basically a 5.8, 5.9 by normal standards. But we did the direct route on this climb, which he had always wanted to do. He had never done before. And I just said, sure. He was excited to actually have somebody along with him that had climbed before, because most of his clients don't have much climbing experience. And we saw a lot of that at the hut. But it's pretty easy to get up there. You just kind of walk up through this snow. This is all covered in snow at the time, and you just head up past these 2 little lakes, get up here, and then the climb goes right up this face here. So the sun comes up at 4. So by the time we started at 6, it was already plenty light out. And so this right here is a snow patch spire. This is the Bugaboo Spire. Our climb is over here out of the screen. So we're just making our way up the hillside. There are these really cool ledges with water running along them as we were going up. This right here, this is the snow patch spire. This right here is the Bugaboo snow patch col. the next day we will actually climb up through that section right there to get onto the Vowel Glacier, which is how we get to the Pigeon Spire. So here we made it up to the Apple Dome camp area. You can see the outhouse. You're not allowed to pee or anything anywhere except for, well, actually, officially, you're not allowed to pee anywhere except for in here, and obviously defecate in there. They fill up all these little bins, and then they fly them out at the end of the season. So it's pretty clean up there, and it's so clean that my guide does not filter his water. He just takes his water bottle, puts it in the stream, and starts drinking. And I thought he was nuts, because I've gotten Giardia before doing that. But it's pretty pristine up there. It's really pretty. So there's campsites scattered all over the place. I think normally people have more camping area, but there was so much snow that there was very little rock area for people to camp on. And they have these cool racks up there for you to hang your stuff and get it out of the snow. And I think keep it from some of the varmints. It's definitely not going to do anything for a bear, but I don't think the bears go up there. And we had to whisper because we figured some people were sleeping. But there's the Bugaboo Spire that I wanted to do. But the guide, because summer had just started literally like 2 days before, he said that the north side, the route I wanted to do, was super wet and snowy, and it would take us way too long to climb it under those conditions. So we unfortunately didn't get to do that on the second day. But the first day, we're going to do some climbs over here, which is this peak right here. This is the Donkey's Ears. And we basically climb up this right in between those two ears. And then we walk down the back side. So here's just looking around when we're approaching those lakes. Here's the first lake. It was still covered in snow and ice. There wasn't any access to the actual water yet. So then here's the lake here. The second lake, this is the second lake. That was the first lake. That's looking at the Bugaboo Spire. It's really just an amazing piece of rock. You're standing there, and it looks, that's better than this little screen here, but it's still bigger than that in real life. So here we are getting up to the two ears. We're going to start our climb right around here. We have to walk up and through this snow section here, walk around the lake, and here we are now at the beginning of the climb. I've never started a climb before on snow. I've never put on climbing shoes, had the bag, had to dig out like a flat spot, because it was so, it was like this edge, and it was really steep. You can't really see how steep it was. We got up here and I was not really thinking about it. And then once we got up there, I looked down and was like, wow, it's really a long ways down there. And we didn't rope up or anything to go up that. I think if I was leading, I would have roped up, but he didn't do that. He was very fast climber. This guy was really fast. He was also vegan, and he had energy like nobody I'd ever seen. So that was impressive. Almost convinced me to go vegan. So here's the base of the climb right here. This is looking up. This is the direct start. It's a little cumbersome, but we made it through. And I took a lot less pictures during the climb, obviously. But these are just some of the moments that I had when I was belaying or waiting for him to pull up the slack. And you can see him up here. This is Sean. He just got set up and at the anchor, and he's pulling up the slack, and I'm getting ready to go up. Here now we're getting into the really steep section. Had some really fun moves. I didn't do any climbing to prepare for this, and it had been years since I did any climbing. So it took a couple pitches before I kind of got the moves flowing again, and by this time I had gotten them back, and I even did one section much better than he did. He was on his knees and doing all sorts of terrible things that I would never do, and I remember being at this point and saying, okay, if there's nothing in front of you, look behind you. And there was some great stuff behind me that all you have to do is put your foot back and you can go. Like, I rubbed it in a little bit, not too much, because he really was a punk. He was arrogant, and I couldn't do anything right in his eyes. So when I did something better than he did, I definitely pointed it out. So here now we're really on the steep section, and this is the Bugaboos Spire, and that's the route right there that I wanted to do. And he had heard from other people recently that it was just really wet. So that's looking back down at the lake. It was really cool. It started melting, and the water flowing into the edges, and it gave it these cool blue rings. It's just brilliant blue. Really neat thing to see. And this is getting towards the last pitch. I think this is the last pitch that I have to go up here, and then there's a really steep section up here. And this is that really steep section. There's Sean right there. This is looking out to the left across this face at the Snowpatch Spire. And then this is one of the two pictures that my guide took of me. Here I am. This is the view down below, and this is right at kind of the end of that last section of the climb, of the last pitch. And so then we had to rappel down a couple sections to get off of the super steep part before we could start descending by foot. And yeah, it was a couple rappels. We actually got lost a little bit. He had never done that route before, and so it was cool. There was a little ounce of adventure in that climb because we got lost a little bit. So that was kind of fun. It's nice getting lost for a little bit, not a lot. And so then we made it back down to the lake, and there are these two women over here that we met the previous day on our hike up. They were really into this enduring the cold type philosophy, which I guess is a thing in Canada. Not so much here, but they're really into when you're cold, acknowledging that you can stay in the cold for much longer than you think you can, and you can hold it, and you'll make it. And they wanted to get in this water right here, and they asked the guide if it was safe because the snow, the water's on top of the snow, and we're like, well, you don't know what's underneath the snow. Does the snow end there? Is it floating? Could you fall through into the water below? And so they're trying to get the guide to tell him that it's safe to do. And they're bothering him. Finally, I said, he's a guide. He can be legally responsible if he tells you it's safe. He's not going to. So they dropped it. And we could finally go down. They did. Yeah, they came back and they didn't show up for a couple hours, and we started wondering, are they okay? And then they showed up, and so then we were relieved. But this is the descent. Once there was really no hazards left, my guy just ditched me, and because he's able to do the glissading, take 10-foot strides, and his legs and stabilizer muscles are all just honed in, and he can just go down like it's not a problem, whereas mine are just screaming at me. And so I got back a little after he did. But it was fun. I tried to ask him, how do you get down this stuff without your knees hurting? He said, well, actually just try to slide as much as you can. And I did that, but I can only go like 5 steps before they're like screaming at me. So whatever I did in the gym got me there, but it's still not going to get you the training that a guide gets you. But I survived. I made it down. That was what I was going for. So that was the first day. The second day, because of the snow on the Bugaboo Spire, I didn't get to do that. So we decided to do the west ridge of the Pigeon Spire. And we were actually even wondering if we were going to do the west ridge of the Pigeon Spire, because the report we got from the previous day was that it was covered in snow across the top, and that it may not even be doable there as well. So I was getting pretty nervous because I wanted to do at least one of these things. And so we got a report back from the other guide that he was able to do it with a group of 4, and they had to walk with their crampons on across the top of the ridge, which seemed really sketchy to me, but the guide was okay with it, so we decided to go for it. So for the Pigeon Spire, here we are starting at the hut. You have to go back up kind of where we were before, but we have to go through that col, the Bugaboo Snowpatch Col. Then you're up onto the Val Glacier. You walk across the Val Glacier over to the west ridge of the Pigeon Spire, and then you climb up through 2 false summits until you finally get to the summit here. And then we come back down, and then we descend through here, because that col is very dangerous once the sun hits it. So we come back down here through the Pigeon Fork of the Bugaboo Glacier and cross underneath through here and go back down to the hut. So that was our route for the day. We did wake up at 3. We were on, or did we get up at 2? I think we got up at 2 and started at 3 so that we hit the col by 4. And then we were on the summit by 8 in the morning. So we moved fast. So this is the next morning at about 4 in the morning, before the sun has started to shine onto the face. And we are actually in that col right now. This is the side of the Bugaboo, or the Snowpatch Spire. And so that's we walked up this couloir here, and that is the Bugaboo Spire to the north. And it's just amazing. It's just the granite. There's just not words to describe what it looks like. The pictures don't really capture it. So we get to the col, the top, and here now is the Pigeon Spire. These are the Hauser Towers. This is the South Hauser Tower. This is called the Hauser Spire. And I had asked him about possibly doing one of these, but he said these were serious undertakings, especially this route here, which seemed pretty fun. But there's so many pitches on it that you have to basically bivvy on it. And I wasn't really in the mood for that, especially with this. The weather for this day was a little iffy. So these clouds, it was really cold. on this day. The previous day was really warm, basically in t-shirts. But this day it was really windy and much colder. So we start making our way across the Val Glacier. You can see some of the convex parts of the glacier showing some crevasses and openings. That's looking out towards the main part of the Val Glacier. And then he wanted to be the first to the top, so he wouldn't allow me to stop and take pictures. So a lot of these are going to be blurry because I'm taking them while I'm walking. And he put his ice axe away, so I knew that there wasn't any real danger of falling into a crevasse through this flat section. So the starting to get a little bit of pink into the clouds, not quite yet. And then we start to get the alpenglow on the Hauser Towers. And then we get a little bit on the Pigeon Spire. And the guide enjoyed going this fast. I think I was actually able to go decently fast because I live here. I think most of his clients live at sea level, and actually a lot of them don't even climb. So I think he was happy with how fast we were going. I hope. He never told me that he was happy. And then that's looking back at the col right here. There's the Bugaboo Spire. That's the view from kind of the southwest. And then this is the Snowpatch Spire. And the clouds kind of block the sun a little bit here and there. Or the sun came through in and out. So 1 second it would be cloudy, and the next moment they would be brilliantly lit up with a really intense light. So this is the second picture he took of me. And this is just looking back at the Pigeon Spire and the Snowpatch Spire. And the sun on these towers is just incredible. It made me want to come back and go do this. I think it would be fun to do. And that's actually looking to the south now. We've actually made it to the West Ridge, and we can see south now. And you can see how much more snow there is facing north than the other direction. So now I've got a vantage point of, this is the south face of the Pigeon Spire. And this is what we have to go up. It's a 5-4 route. They call it a scramble. It's definitely a scramble because there's only like one 5-4 move of a small section that actually needs to be climbed. Technically, the guide used a short roping technique, if you're familiar with that. It makes us go really fast because we don't have to set anchors. We're just constantly moving from one stable position to another. So that was fun. I had never climbed like that before, but I felt safe the whole time. And that was one of the big reasons why I hired a guide, is I wanted to not have an epic adventure on any of these climbs. So here we are climbing up. He basically goes up, finds something to, I don't know, throw his body around, and then I climb up, and then we're on our way. Here's at the top of the first summit. Maybe the second. I'm not super sure at this point, but this is the section that the group from the previous day walked down with crampons on through the snow. And luckily it had melted during the day from all the trampling that we could just walk through it with just our boots on the edge. We didn't bother putting our climbing shoes on. It wasn't hard enough to justify doing that. And we were really glad that we didn't, because we were wading in waist-deep snow in some sections. And as we were on our way down, we're looking at a bunch of the other, what he called recreational climbers. And we felt bad for them because they were in climbing shoes and they had left their boots at the base. So who knows how many of them actually made it. But, oh yeah, here's a third picture he took of me. I had to ask him for this one. So that's a great view. Here's a fun section that we went through. It's not nearly as steep as it looks in the picture. But that was a fun section. And it was really windy at this point. Those clouds were not that much higher than us, but they were just ripping across our heads. It was really neat to see and chilling at the same time. So looking back, that's that section that we walked along. Here's some other people coming through. That's looking over at the Bugaboo Spire. And here we're actually descending down this, descending into here. And then he's actually going to come and climb up around this corner and then up to the top. And this is where we were wading in the snow. And there's another look at the Hauser Towers from where I was waiting patiently, cold. And then, so here we are getting to the top, and we're looking back down at some of his another guided party coming up behind us. And so here we are at the top. There's another section that you can go and claim it's the top too. They're pretty much the same thing. And so they made it to the top, and I gave them this picture afterwards. But yeah, it was pretty cool up there. We didn't stay up there for very long. It wasn't warm. And so here's Sean. He set up the rappel to go off the north side of where we came up from. And this is a really famous section that if you look up the Bugaboos or the Pigeon Spire on Google Images, there will be tons of pictures of people doing crazy things on this section. Here's a picture of somebody walking across. I grabbed these from the internet. Here's somebody doing a silly jump. Somebody doing a single foot stand. It was super windy for me and cold, so I just stood right here. And by this point, I had put on all of my layers because I was that cold. And he was telling me, "We just think of the girls back at the hut. You just need to dig deeper and just hold out for a bit longer. You'd be surprised how long you can make it without your jacket." He was a punk. And so got another picture. I asked him to take this one also. The ones that I said he took were with his camera. All the other times I had to say, "You're taking a picture." And I gave him my camera. But I like that picture there. You can see the snow. This is south facing as July 13th, right? So it was much wetter and colder than I think what is normal for that time of year. So now we made it back down. This is the south side of the Pigeon Spire. What was really cool is there's this snow ridge separated from the Pigeon Spire. And I said, "Why is this thing here? Is this the wind?" He said, "No, it's actually the heat from the sun shining onto the rock, which radiates back and causes the snow to recede from the rock, causing this neat ridge to be right there." I thought it was fascinating. So now we're walking down the Pigeon Fork of the Bugaboo Spire. It was really cool to be out on the glacier. It was super bright. Now, by this point, whatever cloud cover we had was gone. But the snow was still relatively firm at this point. Soft enough that we could plunge step, but firm enough that we're not sinking to our knees or anything like that. And this is looking out to the southwest. The amount of snow they get up there is incredible. According to the guide, they really don't get that much snow. I find this hard to believe, but apparently it just doesn't melt. But if you go much further west, obviously they get tons of snow. So that's looking back at the Pigeon Spire. We've come down a ways. Here's another, that party that was behind us actually passed us. And so there they are. Gives you kind of some perspective. Here are some of the crevasses. You can see it goes quite a ways across. We went in between them, obviously. Just looking back at Sean, he's behind me. That's where you are as the guide. So that if I punch through the crevasse, he'll just keep me from going too deep. Here's the Snowpatch Spire, but from completely different side. And this is some neat glacial activity here, which you see more of right here. And you can see the clouds are still coming in. So it was a neat day to climb. I was glad that we didn't have any bad weather. The clouds made it more exciting though. But I would say, and I kind of was going for this, and I told you on it earlier, that I hired a guide so that it would be safe and I wouldn't have any incidents. But because of that, and he's climbed this God knows how many times, it felt a little boring and mundane because nothing went wrong, right? There was no getting lost. It was just a routine climb for him, and it very much, he communicated that to me. And so it was just, well, this is gorgeous, it's amazing, but there wasn't that sense of adventure. So I think once my youngest is through high school 10 years from now, I'd like to go do some things where there's some real uncertainty again. That's just looking back at that is the Pigeon Spire right there, but looking at it from the east side, so that's actually the east ridge, east face of it. And so yeah, we made it back to the Kain Hut by like noon. So it was pretty quick routine. I slept for a couple hours that afternoon. And once I woke up, then I decided to get up and take some pictures and document what it was like. So that's the hut. This is the bathroom. It's probably 75 yards away from the hut. Yeah. So it's definitely a fair weather hut because you're not going to go all the way out there in the winter to go to the bathroom. But the history behind this thing is really neat. This Conrad Kain, he was a genuine badass. He climbed Mount Robson in 1913, Lewis in 1916, and the Bugaboo Spire in 16. These things were, those were really pushing it for that time. There's a nice little mud room where you can throw all your stuff. And this is the inside. There's more room to hang all your gear. There's the tables, the kitchen. And it's a pretty cool area. Here's the sleeping area on the first floor. There's even a sleeping area on a third floor. Here's the kitchen. It's a climbing hut, so there's lots of information. There are all the guidebooks that you need on all of the climbs, great mapping, route finding information. Here's some information about Conrad Kain. He was a really neat guy. It's amazing to see what they wore back then. And then here's a close-up of the bathroom. It's really cool because this rock cuts out. And so this is actually, it could be raining, pouring down rain. You'd be dry while you're going to the bathroom. It's really neat setup. And when this thing was originally built, it did run on propane as the light source. They then did convert it to electric, but this is some of the original gas lights that they used. So that's it. Thanks.
All right, so we can start taking questions from in the room here, and then if anybody wants to add questions to the chat on Zoom, feel free to do so.
Yeah.
Jonathan, did you hike back down that afternoon, or did you spend the night and go the next day?
So did I hike back down that afternoon? We could have. No, we didn't. I had booked the guide for an extra day because we didn't know what was going to happen on that day. And I honestly, I had booked a guide for Mount Hood years ago and didn't get to climb anything. So I booked 2 more days than we really needed to do the climb, just so that I had that extra buffer. And I was glad I did, especially when I got there and it was so cloudy and rainy. I felt better about it because of that. But yeah, it only took 3 hours to hike back to the car. My legs were about ready to give out and my back was spasming by the time I got to the car, but I made it to the car. Yeah.
Did you have to recover physically, like your back was spasming? So how long did it take for you to kind of recover completely?
So did it take me time to recover physically? Yes, it did, but not nearly as long as I thought it might, especially because I was starting to spasm the afternoon after I got back. Getting some things out of the roof rack caused me to seize up a couple times. And so I really just kind of laid down for the rest of that afternoon. The next day, I still had a little bit of tightness in my problematic glute, but by that day after that, I was fine. Yeah.
So how many pounds of lentils and rice did you bring?
How many pounds of lentils and rice did I bring? So I did eat a lot of lentils and rice, but apparently they did put a lot of protein powder into it so that we had more nutrition to recover. But I don't know, it didn't seem like that much. We brought minimal amounts of food so that we didn't have to bring it back out. Yeah.
When you were climbing up, were you in your backpack, were you prepared to spend the night if you had to?
When I was climbing up, were we prepared to spend the night on the route? Definitely not. I mean, I had a puffy, I had my soft shell, I had insulating layer, I had my hard shell, my beanie. I would say I'd survive the night. I've done that in the winter accidentally in Animas Valley in January. So I wasn't that worried about freezing, but I'm glad that we had what we had because it was cold. Yeah.
How did you choose the guide?
How did I choose the guide? Well, there's a guiding company, one big one in the Canadian Rockies called Yamnuska Mountain Guides. they had the most experience, a lot of reviews and stuff like that. So I chose them. They picked the guide for me. Sean was notified about 12 hours before our climb that my guide had COVID and that he was going to guide me instead. So I didn't even get the guide that I was originally scheduled to get. And this was the first year after COVID where they actually got a reasonable amount of people requesting to stay in the hut, because the previous year they all stayed in tents. Yeah, and I didn't want to stay in the tent because that would be like 10 more pounds that I'd have to bring, because you have the cooking equipment and the tent and all that stuff. I don't think I would have been able to carry a 50-pound pack.
So one question from online was kind of related. The cooking in the hut, was that your responsibility? Did your guide provide the food?
So I actually paid the extra money to have the food provided by the guide service, because we were in the middle of a road trip and I didn't want to think about that in the middle of that. And because of that, he kind of cooked for me, which was nice. But yeah, he did the cooking. He drank directly from the faucet, but most people actually boiled the water before drinking it.
Okay, so a couple more from online. What did your family decide to do while you were off hiking?
Well, I booked them a campground in Kootenay National Park. So they drove back down that dirt road, went over there. I remembered that there was supposed to be hot water, electricity in the bathrooms. Turns out there was none of that. And they weren't very happy with me when I got back. And there was no signal either. So we were actually sending her a text message telling her when we were going to be at the trailhead the next day and when to come pick us up. She never received it. She was coming into town. She was going to plan on doing some things. She had not heard anything from us. And once she got reception, she found out that she was supposed to be there in a half an hour. And it's an hour up this dirt road. So we actually caught a ride with somebody else just to start going down the dirt road. And we're going down the dirt road and we see this sequoia just ripping up the dirt road. And that was my wife. We had to, hey, wait, stop. So they dropped us off and we switched cars. That was fun.
Okay, so Barbara wants to know, do you know when that hut was built? She was there in 1973. The hut was not so fancy and there was no bathroom. I heard later the hut we stayed in had been destroyed.
That might have been a different hut. That was probably a different hut, but so I did learn from the guides up there that there was another hut over towards Victoria Peak or something like that, that has recently been torn down. It reached 100-year life and it was falling apart, and they decided to tear it down, which I thought was awful because they're not going to replace it with anything. So they're actually reducing access up there, which is disappointing. And like Mount Robson, where I want to go up and do Mount Robson, you can't even, it's a 27-mile walk one way just to get to the climb now. When Kain first did it, it wasn't even close to that. You could get much closer. So they're artificially making it more difficult to get to these climbs, which is a bummer.
Okay, was your guide good about teaching you mountaineering techniques?
I went with a lot of experience already, so we didn't do any review or anything. We just walked up to the climb and told me that he was climbing, and I told him his belay was on, and he started going. So no, we didn't really do anything for training. I had to provide a good resume to justify that.
Okay, you kind of said it, but would you choose that guide or that guiding company again?
Okay. Yes, I would definitely choose that guiding company again. They're very professional. They know what they're doing. They have a lot of experience. There are some more freelance guides that I think that you can hire as well, but I would be less comfortable with them because of how much experience and how much volume this company has.
Okay, any more questions from in the room? Okay, I'll keep an eye on the chat, but if those are all the questions, I just want to say thank you so much again, Jonathan, for sharing your adventure with us. And everyone, please remember to look out for that survey coming to your email. If you're interested in more peak programs, we have a lot coming up. Just get on our website. And yeah, thanks again, everyone, for joining us tonight, and have a good night.